And welcome to this episode of Game Creation. And today we are trying to communicate with the world, right? We're trying to get our application, because remember, we're not doing games this week, or this fortnight, we're doing application. So our application needs to find information from the web. Now, one way you can do this is you can have the application open a website. We can then go through the website, find the information we need, and, there's no point in having an application for that. That's us doing all the work. We want Clickteam to do all the work for us, right? So we're going to be building a way of finding out all of the board games with a certain name in, right? And that's what I want to do today. So what I need is an API that allows me to tell the API, and an API is like a website, right? But the API talks in computer language, right? So like a normal website you go to, it has pictures, it has layouts, it has all that nice thing. An API is exactly the same thing, but it just gives information. It just gives stuff that a computer can then pass, right? A computer can then read, right? So we need to find an API for board games, which is the project we're doing today. Well, I already know that Board Game Geek has a free API, and that's something you've got to be careful of. If you've read any of the news at the moment with Twitter charging for their API, a lot of websites do charge for the API. I run websites, and I can tell you now that server costs are incredibly expensive. So it's not a surprise that most websites will charge for an API. But Board Game Geek, who I'm using today, doesn't charge, which is really, really good. Now you might be thinking, well, why do they charge? Because if you go to the website, it's free. But if you do an API call, it's not free. How does that work? Well, if you go to a website, they can serve you ads. They can get you interested in buying products and affiliate links. With an API, you don't get any of that. So they're not getting the same revenue to pay for the service. Right. Anyway, let's get started. So there are multiple ways in which you can communicate with an API. There are loads and loads of tools, and depending on where you're exporting to, I'm exporting to Windows because I'm just going to run it on here. So I'm going to be using the get object. Now you might be thinking, there we go. Now you might be thinking, well, what does the word get mean? In on websites, there are two ways to communicate with a website. In fact, there are more, but let's not go into sessions or anything like that. Okay, two main ways. There are get and post. The get is what you have in the parameters of the URL. So if you ever see a URL with a question mark and then a string of stuff afterwards, and we're going to be using that today, that is a get request. A post request is all done silently, right? So you don't have it in the URL, and it's good for submitting passwords and stuff. It doesn't mean it's completely silent. It doesn't mean it's completely safe, but the user doesn't see it, and so it's not like in the URL. So it would be really bad to share passwords using get, use post, right? So there's these two things. The get object actually uses post as well, it gets really, really confusing. But anyway, so we've got our get object. Now this is the same as most objects we're using this week. Doesn't show up anything. This is mainly for the event editor. So if we go to the event editor and we just say start a frame, where are we doing? Start a frame. Now we can actually use any URL for the get request. So I could just use Google, so www.google.com. I don't know whether I need the HTTPS, but anyway, let's just pretend we don't. And I'm going to make a mistake here deliberately. It's a mistake that probably is quite common for new people. I don't know. We shall see. Right. So I'm going to have my string there. And the mistake is I'm going to say start a frame, and I want to output the get thing, right? So get received. Okay, that's that simple, isn't it? Just get received. Done. Beautiful. And if I run this, nothing happens. In fact, it's blank because it says text normally. Why is that happening? Well, that's happening because the internet takes time, right? So you need to wait for the get request to come. So you need to say on get complete, right? When you've got the get request. And you might be thinking, well, hang on, what if you need to get multiple things with the get request? What you can do here is just set, we use a data object, like set an alterable variable somewhere, maybe the global variables, and you set it to 1, and then you say if it's 1, then this is the one we're talking about. If it's 2, this is the one we're talking about, etc. Right, now we have that get received. Got to wait a little bit of time. And there's probably an error because I bet you need HTTP. So HTTPS semicolon // There we go. Okay. And there's all of Google. Now, you can see that's not very readable at all. And yeah, that's just basic HTML, right? And that will go on for a long time. Okay, so that's Google. Now, that's not readable code. So we're going to use this API that I've been talking about. And this is the API here. Now, this is for Board Game Geek. And there are terms of service. So I'm not saying that you can use this. I'm not saying that you can use this for the purpose. Blah, blah, blah. But check out with them for their terms of use here. And be good, because free APIs are amazing, and don't abuse them. So make sure you don't put too many requests through. And sometimes they can block you by IP if you're using them too much. You can see here that this is really readable for a computer. Okay, so a computer can say, okay, so what year was Seven Wonders published? Well, go to the years published. And this is what XML is. In fact, it's the same as HTML. You have a tag that says, a piece of information. You've got the piece of information between that tag and the same tag but shut. And the way you shut a tag is with this // Okay? So we want to get this information. Okay? So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to paste it in. So instead of going to Google, we're going to paste this in. And let's run it now. Bob, bob, bob. There we go. So we've got all this beautiful HTML. Now, XML. You can pass this XML. It's beyond today's video because it's just a real pain to do. But maybe in a later video down the line, we'll look at how to pass this. And basically, passing means that you go through all this information. And you can imagine that you want the name of it and the year published, and you can write it in a nice list. Or a select menu or something like that on Clickteam. So there is it's an easy XML parser or easy XML, and there's other things you can use to parse the XML, right? And you can check the forums out for that. But what I want to do is I want to send a GET request. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a simple input. Where's the edit box? There we go. And I'm going to do a button. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, instead of start of frame, I'm going to say when the button's pressed. And instead of it always being Catan, I'm going to add the text from that. Now, this is the get parameter. This is what I was talking about before. The get parameter is basically at the end of a URL, there's a question mark. That question mark means, right, I've stopped talking about the address. We're no longer talking about the URL, which is this bit here. We're now just going to give get parameters. And a get parameter is a question mark. That's the start of the get parameter. The parameter you want to give, so search in this case, an equal sign, and then the actual parameter, right? The actual value. Now you might be thinking, well, hang on, what if you wanted to do multiple ones? Is it another question mark? No, you can only have one question mark. So it's an ampersand, and then, I don't know, height equals 56 or something, I don't know, whatever, right? So all of the rest of them will have an ampersand and then parameter value, right? That's straightforward. And you'll see these all the time. If you didn't know about get parameters, look at whenever you use the internet, look at it, look at the URL, and you'll see a question mark with a whole load of parameters. It's one of those things, as soon as you know it, you go see it all the time. Right. So if I run the application now, nothing will happen. Okay. So let's do Monopoly, if I can spell. And let's have a look. So it's looking it up now. There's a problem. Oh, it's not come back with any. That's interesting. No, that looks good. So what I can do is I can get this information here, and I can put the multiple string to like looking up and put that in. Let's try a different ball game. So Carcassonne. I have no idea where I spelled that right, actually. Is it Carcassonne? Okay, let's think. Risk. Risk is a better one. So looking up. Oh, there we go. Ah. Let's have a look. Maybe I spelt it wrong. Monopoly. No. Just write Mon. Maybe there's just so many monopolies that it times out. It's really weird. But Risk is a safe bet. Risk it was happy with. And you can see you've got all of the games with the word risk in. Risk taking, alien invasion risk, etc. And the API, if you look it up, has like a lot of other options on it. So once you find the title, you can find out way more information about it. So with APIs normally, you have like finding the thing that you want. You get the ID from the thing you want, and then you put that ID into it, and it gives you way more information about it. So this, hopefully, for some of you, will open up a whole world of like, oh, it'd be really good if I had a way of finding video games that I haven't played or whatever, and you can create an app now. There are, I think it's GamesDB or something. There's a really great one that has a list of all video games, and it's really, it's like community led. There's a whole load of people volunteering their time to create it, but it's really up to date and really detailed and very accurate. So hopefully that has inspired some of you. If you want to do a project on this, let me know. What API do you use? What API do you want to use? Keep the ideas coming in. This was sort of inspired by someone who gave loads of ideas yesterday. So keep them coming in. I will have 6 ideas by the time I film the video tomorrow to do the rest of the fortnight. But I'm going to leave it there. If you've liked this video, click like. If you want to see more from us, click subscribe. And thank you very much.